part of the gang again. My name is Jeanne Mayo, and welcome to the Jeanne Mayo 100X podcast. And once again, I am joined by my fearless partner, Vance Smith. You fearless partner, nice shirt.
Thank you.
And why don't you tell everybody what we're kind of unpacking briefly today from a leadership perspective?
We are talking about speaking the truth to someone when they don't want to hear it.
And we all understand that because we are part of that. And I'm going to throw a question back to him in a minute. But I think, gosh, one of the toughest balances in life is kind of what sometimes I call the coach companion balance. Or if you look at Ephesians when it says speak truth in love, it's that Ephesians truth love balance. And gosh, I don't think we can be effective as a friend, certainly as a business partner, as a Christian, certainly as a leader in any arena, but man, really in a ministry arena, unless we take seriously not only the privilege of speaking truth when somebody doesn't want to hear it, but also the responsibility of doing that. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. So a fun question for me to ask you, because we're friends. He runs our amazing young adult ministry here at Victory Church. Unpack, just as somebody in your life, I'm sure there's been more than one, because I've had more than one, who's again, been all the way in your team, and you knew that. So they had the love side of that truth love pendulum, but they also were able to in a right way say some truth to you that you were okay to hear.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we are on your podcast, so I hope this isn't weird, but I think the main person that comes to mind, especially, well, because you are my boss and my mentor. I
am kind of his boss, but I like the mentor line a lot better than the boss line.
But really, I mean, there's a reason that you're teaching on this. You are the master at this. Like, there have been so many times where you have corrected something that I was doing, and I didn't realize I was corrected until like 3 weeks later.
You're too nice.
Because it's so encouraging, because you see things, you care about people. And so for me personally, I think that you do a great job at this. I feel like that's also something that builds trust in our relationship.
Absolutely.
You know, you want somebody who you know is looking out for you. And I think one of the main ways that you show that you care and that you're looking out is by trying to make me better.
Yeah. So. And it's so fun to be able to say this in his presence. Not only do I have the privilege of occasionally helping him on some things, but gosh, I give that privilege back to him. And he, in all the right ways, all the respectful ways, uses it. Like we were kidding right before we started to film about a time recently where he said to me about some of my clothing choices on some pictures we were posting. Mom, you don't dress like that around us. So in other words, let's get rid of the glamour shots and let's use some real ones so people can connect you. But golly, it is so easy to be the kind of person as a leader, even as a parent, who thinks we have the right to correct other people, but we don't open ourselves to take it back. And I think, number one, that's really phony. But number two, people like Vance in my life keep me healthy. Yeah. So for real, I'm not trying to just be stupid, but thanks for being that. So let me kind of, again, take us all back to what I've already referenced, Ephesians 4:15, speaking truth in love. And I think all of us listening need to say to ourselves right now, which am I better at? Which one am I wired more to do? The truth side or the love side? Because all of us have predispositions, both for one or the other. And I think you have to know yourself. I'm the little girl who wants everybody to like me. I'm a 2 on an Enneagram. And so I want everybody to like me. So I'm like the love side. But gosh, as the years have gone on, I've had to get okay at the truth side, or then the teams around me and my own family and my friends, and let alone trying to disciple anybody. You can't do it with that. And it really, for the ground level of what we're going to talk about today, I want to unpack Galatians 6, verses 1 through 2. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, it may be a weakness or whatever you're talking, not necessarily a big sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. Gosh, I love that line. Restore that person gently, but watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Really profound. Verse 2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So let me unpack my thoughts here a little bit. If I were trying to do it in a few steps, you might consider. Step 1, if you're scribbling any notes, realize Galatians 6 says, restore that person gently. I love that term is used there. In other words, don't be demeaning. Have a voice tone of restoration, not one of anger. That's why lots of times when I need to be saying something to somebody, I need to wait. I often say, Jeannie, don't react, respond, because oftentimes when I want to get something said to somebody, I'm not going to say it in a gentle voice tone. I'm going to say it out of reaction instead of response. And oftentimes I found when I'm doing that, the best way to open the conversation is by asking a question, because that makes the other person less defensive. So I would say something like this: hey, our relationship is really important to me, and I'd love to give you some feedback. Is that okay with you? Or maybe another question would be, if it's dealing with something specific, I'd love to talk to you about X, like a situation that occurred. What do you think went well? And then after what do you think we might want to revisit or could have been misunderstood? So I'm just saying a great way to come across gentle is by using a question to begin with. And I have to say to myself all the time, confrontation needs to be a dialogue, not a monologue. And so step number 2 is I have to verbalize the problem or the challenge or whatever I'm trying to address clearly and specifically, yet with that lack of a demeaning voice tone that I've already said. Because when we talk in flowery language, people don't get what we're trying to say. And they're going, at least for me, I'm thinking, get to it. I can tell, are trying to admonish something, and I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. So I'm just saying, don't be all vague. Tell me. I just had a conversation with a key leader not long ago, and they're trying to say something to me, and I'm giving them all the words, and they still don't have the guts to say it. So I'm just specifically, clearly, I think, rehearse your words sometimes, at least in your head, on the key way you're going to approach it. No surgeon ever went into a surgery saying, I'm gonna be cutting around inside this person somewhere. They're going to rehearse where in the world they're going after something. And I think the parallel is different. And hear this is so important, because people always say to me, you confronted me, and it kind of like Vance was nice enough to say, I didn't even realize it was being confronted. Well, must have, or it just didn't. I can take it from you, Jeannie, when I can't take it from other people. And I just think it is super important to try to communicate in a fashion that you yourself could hear, which I think is big. But for me, I say in a fashion that arouses the least possible defensiveness. And gosh, that's a big deal. So let me throw the question to you. I know that that's so simple. Why is it so important, if you're going to try to tell something to somebody that they maybe don't want to hear, that you come across as non-defensively as you can?
Man, I think that it disarms the other person.
I agree.
Because the primary goal is the solution. And so when you come across defensive, I find myself when I'm wanting to address something, I think the biggest challenge is to not do it out of frustration.
Yes.
Because that just ramps that up in the other person. And then it doesn't get to the solution that you want. And so if I want something done a little differently, That's the goal. And so I don't have to, I try to like leave all the baggage of my frustration outside of the conversation.
Absolutely.
Because that doesn't help us get anywhere. I think just naturally, when somebody comes to you in frustration or defensive,
I agree.
if you're coming to me to correct something, if it feels confrontational,
yes,
then I think naturally we start getting defensive. We start looking at the other person,
I agree.
looking for something to say negative about
Absolutely.
them. Well, you do this
Yes,
or you
absolutely.
do that. And it just doesn't turn into anything good. And so I think when you can just address the situation non-defensively and disarm the other person to where they're not walking into a battle, but it's actually a constructive conversation, I think you actually get to the goal. Absolutely. Or else you just get caught up in the muddy middle ground.
That's a great way of looking at it. And so again, that's why I say sometimes begin it with a question, rehearse some of your words. You've got to take responsibility for how you communicate if you want people to listen well. And, you know, I'm the one who's taught the sandwich principle. Tell them something you appreciate, then correct, and then something you appreciate. On the other hand, be careful if the only time they hear you affirming them is right before you're letting the shoe drop. I mean, that feels really phony to them. So again, you're going to have to, for me, the people that are the easiest to be able to share truth with are people that I've done a little bit of life with. I've earned some right. Sometimes you don't have the ability to do that, obviously, but it's going to be easier if you've earned the right on that.
Yeah.
All right, let me talk about step 3 on going back to, again, the Galatians scripture. The Galatians scripture says, restore that person. That's the operative verb. And so I'm going to say again, as you talk to them, you've got to have a clear mental picture of the end game. It is not just alignment. That's a big difference. It's restoration. Wow. It's helping them be better on the other side. Not just winning, not just proving your point, not just getting them told. It's you're better on the other side. If you restore something, you're coming back to original value or helping it be even more. So again, you've got to look beneath the surface and saying some words that will open up what I call the story behind the story. Man, that's so important. I think I love to say words like this, especially if it's somebody I care about. Talk to me a little bit. And I'm not playing shrink. I'm not having the big shrink voice tone. If it's a pattern, especially one with significance, you know, lighter alignments certainly don't need this. But if it's a pattern in the person's life, like mine, I've got plenty of patterns. I can tell you why I respond certain ways at certain times. But the restoration principle says, I want to know the story behind why you're reacting that way or why you tend to go off the rails at this point. And so, you know, sometimes I'll say to people, talk to me, there's probably a reason why this response comes easily out of you or that attitude comes across or why in those kinds of situations you find yourself ramping up or whatever. Talk to me. Tell me a little bit of the story behind that. And sometimes I can look at people and legitimately say, I think part of the reason is that your strength is playing against you as weakness. Like you can look at a really conscientious person and say, hey, Ryan, I think part of the reason why this goes on is your strength is you're conscientious. You believe in truth. You care about truth and righteousness and the right stuff happening. Thus, it's easy for that strength to become a little judgmental. And so when I heard you talking the other day to a couple of people, I'm just going, whoo, wow, let's change the voice tone on that. So sometimes, again, that spirit of meekness is also in restoration, is saying, okay, let me unpack the strength that goes against you as weakness. Step 4, and I love this phrase in the Galatians thing, watch yourself or you also may be tempted. In the original language, it says, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. And so, gosh, I love to share truth in a way that is mutual. And I'm not going to make up lines, but I'm going to make what I call consider yourself statements. I'm watching myself statements. So it's not just my finger pointing at them. I maybe don't deal with that exact issue, but I promise you, if I unpack some of the root structure for every issue in life, I deal with it. I mean, not even past tense. I probably still deal with a bunch of the roots. So when I make statements, and I don't do it falsely, saying, hey, I know I myself can come across this way a bunch of time. I totally get it. So making those consider yourself statements, watch yourself. So it's not like you're the big religious judge that you're getting the world told. None of us like to respond to that. And then just a couple more. Number 5, I think for the more substantial times, and you don't have to work through all these steps every time, but for the more substantial times, I think it's important to give the other person a comfortable chance to disagree with you or to say, you're misreading what came across there or whatever. I think, number 1, that makes you easier to listen to. Because if you don't let them unpack some of that, like Vance said, their emotional energy is going to stay on how they can defend themselves. And that's not what you want it to be. And so, again, give them a chance to disagree without going emotionally ballistic on them, without being defensive. Even if some of their disagreement is irrational, let them feel heard. Do you hear that? And say, hey, maybe I worded that wrong. And I often say to people on more significant talks, do you think I'm off base there? Or do you think I misunderstood you? Whatever. And then step 6, if appropriate, it's not always appropriate, but if appropriate, sometimes create some sort of follow-up or accountability or strategy. That's not always, appropriate in this situation, just to help change, move into their future. A lot of people just fire at people and then never give a rip afterwards. And I wrote on my notes here, remember, don't use a nuclear missile when a slingshot would work. And for me, I want to use missiles when I've overweighted the confrontation and I've been ticked over something time and time again, and finally I've had it. I should have talked 2 or 3 times earlier, and then I just blow up, and then I'm forever having to go back and apologize and say, hey, the way I said that, my attitude, my voice tone stunk. I am super sorry. So let's end with this. From the vantage point, Vance, of a millennial, but also representing Generation Z, everybody coming up, why do you think this generation is so in need of, in the right way, some people who have the guts to speak occasionally, not all the time, but some hard truth to them sometime? Is this a need? Why is this such a big deal?
Yeah, I think it's a huge need. I think it's probably because we don't get it much.
That's really true. That's really true.
I think everything is fashioned around us looking for affirmation, whether that's through social media. Like, nobody wants criticism on social media. Like, nobody's putting up a post and saying, hey, can I have some constructive criticism on this? It's like, we are looking for people to tell us that we're amazing and we're great. And a lot of times that's how we build our friendship circles.
Yes.
And then it can become uncomfortable. And I think that's how a lot of people get stagnant and don't grow.
I agree.
I think that's why a lot of us stay immature for so long, because there's nobody around to be able to do that. And I think that when we experience it done well, it becomes a breath of fresh air. Right. And so then we start craving it. But especially when we haven't had it done well, like maybe we had like overcritical parents or adult figures growing up, then we can kind of shrink back and not feel comfortable being corrected. But it's something that we desperately need, but we need it done well. And so I think even just this teaching was even just great for me to hear. Attitude, voice tone, all of those things that just a lot of us don't think about. when we're wanting to give correction, like even giving the sandwich method, but like with a bad attitude or voice tone, and then the other person is, well, like you said, just waiting on you to give the negative feedback, even as you're giving the compliment, because it's like, okay, this person is giving me the sandwich method right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when done well, it's such a breath of fresh air, and it's so building. And I think that we really do want to be better. I think we just want to be encouraged along the way.
Oh, so true. So here's what I know as I wrap stuff up. Stats on Generation Z, the current generation, tell me that one of the most defining marks of this generation is that they are, and this is what the statisticians called it, leaderless, mentorless. They haven't had parents or voices to lead and speak into their life. So they may not know how to respond. And see, here's the tough part. A bunch of people then enter marriage, and the first person that finally speaks truth to them is their marriage partner.
Man.
And oh my goodness, help us, Hannah. That's not really good. Because the partner needs to speak up, but it causes all sorts of tension in the marriage. They're hearing stuff they should have heard as a kid in third grade, but they're just now hearing it because the person can't put up with it. So I'm just saying, gosh, what a privilege it is to our families, to our friends, as iron sharpens iron, friends, to our business associates, but most of all, if we have any sort of leadership in church circles, to those that we're trying to make an impact for Jesus. What a privilege to be a person who speaks truth in love, even when that other person they're not necessarily signing up to hear it. So, hey, thanks for hanging with us. Can't wait to be with you real soon. Get word out and let people know that we have a podcast that might be worth looking at and listening.